Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Greatech Group. You're invited to join our MEP and construction innovation adventure with a mission to propel this great industry forward. My guest today is Bryson Reaume. Bryson is a self-proclaimed idea guy and prides himself on dealing with stress well while always maintaining a positive perspective. His knowledge was built from the ground up as he worked in the trades for half a decade before moving into executive management. He's passionate about ensuring the firm's vision, values, and targets are aligned so they can maintain the highest standards for their employees, partners, and clients. His long history in the industry and his service in the military have taught him the value of an honest day's work and show him the importance of maintaining relationships, something he instills at all levels of his company. Welcome to the show, Bryson.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Well, first off, thank you for your service to the country. That's nothing to slouch at. Those. All hats off to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How'd you get into the construction industry?
My father was a general contractor, so he was a residential GC in the kind of Los Angeles area. So I grew up in and around it. He used to flip homes, so I actually lived in probably 4 or 5 half-built homes when I was growing up, because he would move the family in and then build the home around us and it'd be beautiful, and then be like, "All right, we're leaving." Kind of flip art. So that was a little bit of my childhood there. And then I moved up north to San Luis Obispo, and in my high school days, I was lucky enough to, one of my good friends, their father was a GC up there, and I started working in the trades with him. It was a lot of framing, concrete work, so Rouse construction. So yeah, I had a lot of experience from the business side where my dad was involved to the trade side when I was doing it myself.
Yeah. Well, what about it gripped you to make a career out of it?
You know, it was one of those things where I loved working in the trades. There's just something about hard work, working daily, that I really, really enjoyed. And so just naturally through that, getting in more to the business side. But I really saw it firsthand when I was working with the gentleman, Bill Rouse, up north, because it was a really small outfit. It was actually, he did all the framing and concrete himself, and I was essentially his number one assistant. So I got to see a lot on the business side with him early on. And then when I came back to LA, I had an opportunity to work with my father on a large project in downtown LA. And again, it was just my father and myself in a large adaptive reuse downtown. And that's when I kind of got thrown into the fire back then, and started a company back then. And about 18 months into that, my father retired and was like, "I'm not doing this anymore. Have fun with this." And just kind of like learning from drinking from a fire hose. So I took that and ran with it. And God, that was 20 years ago, I think. So kind of thrown into it. And since then had kind of ventured out into a lot of different things, but I've always loved it. I've always loved the build side of it. But as I started to get more into the business side, I actually realized I loved the business aspect of it even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So kind of building out on the corporate side, how do you build and then really maintain a good corporate culture in construction when the team is not all in the same spot at the same time? They're spread out over job sites, and some are in the office, some are in the field. How do you maintain that culture?
Yeah, and that's a constant conversation that we had. You know, when we started, there was only a handful of us, and at one point we got up to 60 plus people. And so in construction, it's very difficult, right? You have projects. We have projects all over Los Angeles. People spread out all over. So I started reading all these books on culture, and Tony Zappos and things like that. All these people and innovators in the kind of culture world. And the first thing I started coming away with was none of this really applies to construction, because I don't have 200 people on a single floor in an office. Right. I'm not a tech company. I'm not a financial company. So we kind of had to step back and look at it from a different angle of how do you create this culture when your people are spread all over. And it's been difficult. It's a constant kind of riddle for us of how do you continually bring people back in and kind of remind them, like, hey, you're part of a bigger company here with a bigger vision and values and things like that. So what we've done, and we were lucky enough to work under this EOS model, which I'm sure you've heard of before. Mm-hmm. We have a kind of a two-pronged approach where quarterly, we'll bring everybody in to the office and we'll do what's called a state of the company address. And that's just our opportunity to reiterate what we hope they already know, which is our vision, our values, our targets for the next year, what we're kind of working towards. But past that, we really spend a lot of time on how do you create these interpersonal relationships in the field with the teams? Because I was having a great conversation with a friend the other day about this, about culture. And it's this concept that, all companies have to have this culture like Elon Musk and Tesla or Richard Branson and Virgin. And that general concept is just not realistic, right? What if you're John Doe and you sell paper clips? It's like there's not a huge amount of social impact there. There's not a huge amount of purpose behind that, but it's a great company to work for. People will stay there. So we started looking at that, and his comment to me was, they're not staying there because they love John Doe, who's a normal business owner. They're not staying there because they love and they're passionate about selling paper clips at the end of the day. They're staying there because of the people that they work with and the interpersonal relationships that they've created and the quality of life that they've created. So I really love that kind of viewpoint on it of you have to have a good culture and a good base overall. But once the company starts to grow, you end up with this scenario of you really need to make sure that you're creating really quality relationships. So you're creating quality of life for your employees. And that comes from a feeling of belonging overall. So we spend time on that. So on job sites, for example, we'll tell our project managers, hey, you need to take your people out for happy hour. Do whatever you want to create that connectivity. So there's more than just a job. It's a relationship. And we found that they'll stay because of those relationships. They're not going to stay because, hey, we think Bryson's really great and we really love this vision. As much as I would hope that they would stay because of that, realistically, when you step back, they're staying because the people next to them, they enjoy working with them. They enjoy showing up to work every day and the back and forth and belonging in that type of community that you create. So we spend a lot of time doing that, and that seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, that relationship aspect of it is huge, and that's where you are able to scale up and down and maintain a good, healthy culture. How have you found works well to really empower the ownership on the individual level to take the mantle of developing and fostering those relationships and run with it?
Yeah. For us, it starts starts at the executive level, and again, we have a pretty good operating system that we work under with the EOS program. But yeah, and it just goes down kind of like direct report to direct report to direct report. So making sure that when you talk about those relationships, I look at our executive team and say, I have this really amazing relationship with this group of 6 people that we have here. But then you realize out in the field, you really need to let your project management team know. So if we bring all of our project management team in for a project management meeting, we'll really let them know, hey, we want you to be doing things with your team outside of just the day-to-day grind, the day-to-day, all the way to creating culture budgets where it's like, hey, we're going to give you a budget to go out, do whatever you want with it. Obviously, let us know what you're doing with it and give us some feedback on how it's working. But people will just do simple happy hours and go have drinks, and then hopefully we're notified so we can go partake in that. K1 Speedway, ski shooting, golfing, things like that. But that's more on a project team level than it is on a company-wide level. And then on the company-wide side, again, we don't ignore that, but we do have our quarterly state of the company address, really kind of bring the whole team back together to get them re-energized behind the vision. And then, we usually do 1 or 2 larger company events a year to try and get everyone together. I think that works well, but at the end of the day, it's really creating those experiences for those individuals to where they feel that connection. And they don't feel like they're just alone in this random job.
Right. Yeah. I like how you guys have built in the different cadences of, the small group, and then you expand that out. You have a cadence there with a little bit larger group, and then the company wide, you have a cadence there. I think having all those rhythms really helps to weave a great foundation there.
Yeah. And that helps. So on the construction side, it works well. It's a little bit easier if you're all in one location, 24 hours a day.
Sure.
Like that type of thing. Like you don't have to worry about bringing people in, but in the construction world, it worked well for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of expanding that out to the project side of things, having the right people on the bus and in the right seats is a huge make or break aspect of really any project. So how do you go about thinking through selecting the right team for the specific project?
Yeah. Yeah, and I love you use those EOS terms there, the right people in the right seats. That's a big part of that. And so what we've done for, essentially trying to find the right teams and setting a project up for success is we take that model, and it's right people, right seats, but taking it a little farther, it's like, what are the right firms for the right projects?
Mm-hmm.
So we do owner's representation, construction management work, we do real estate development, we do general contracting. So we're lucky enough to really have the whole ecosystem covered and have had the ability to see all aspects of it. So we've seen it from the development side, we've seen it from the management side, we've seen it from the build side. And for setting things up for success on a project side, finding the right people, the amount of times that we see owner developers just cherry pick a random group of teams and throw them in a pot and then hope it all works out. I mean, it's probably more the norm than not. So we really try and focus on working with clients and saying, hey, you need to pick the right team for the project. We'll take it back to like, if you're a surgeon and you're going in and you don't want a throat surgeon if you're having a knee surgery. And you especially don't want that, surgeon working with a team that he's never worked with before in terms of, nurses, anesthesiologists. You want the best knee surgeon for that knee surgery who's working with a team that he's worked with 10 times before. So they all know what success looks like at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So we take that and we try and bring that to a project level. So if we're working on a specific project like a historic adaptive reuse, we want to make sure we're bringing in the right architecture firm, had success with that. But we'll even go a little bit deeper than that. It's not just the architecture firm, right? So say if you're working with Gensler, people love Gensler. It's an amazing firm, but we say that's great that you're working with Gensler. But what we want to know is who's the architect you're working within Gensler, and does that person or that team have the experience that we need to be successful?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll go to teams that they love working with. Do they have any structural teams that they love working with, civil teams? And then we'll take that and we'll go down deeper and say, great, this person loves working with GlueMac. Well, who do you know at GlueMac that you've worked with before? Oh, well, I know Dave over there at GlueMac. He's amazing. So we'll try and really bring a real team together where they know each other, they've worked with each other before, and you can do that. Creating that those interpersonal relationships on a project level is going to solve so many problems because you're starting the project off with this mindset of collaboration out of the gate with people that know each other. Where if you just throw a bunch of firms and people together that have never worked with each other, you don't have that, and there's not a lot of, I don't know what you want to call it, loyalty or people looking out for each other. At the end of the day, that's where you end up with a lot of finger pointing and not my job. It was architect's fault, it was engineer's fault. So we do a lot of that upfront work, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the culture and the relationship that you're trying to work out on building there. But being willing to say no to certain projects and certain people, that's not an easy thing to do. So how is really having that willingness to say no, how has that led to long-term success for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's specific to our project type on the build side that we do. We've done a lot of historic adaptive reuse. So we learned early on that there's kind of one way to do those properly. So when someone would come to us and we see, I call it old school contract, where we see people that will work for 12 to 16 months with their design team, putting together this beautiful set of plans on a large project. Then they'll turn and they'll look at 4 GCs and they'll give them 3 weeks to prepare competitive pricing. And that to me is just the most insane style of contracting that I've ever seen or development, because why are you spending 16 months with your design team and then turning around to the team that's going to actually build it and giving them 3 weeks? It's basically a race to the bottom at the end of the day.
Right.
So it's very, very easy for us when clients approach us with that mentality where it's a hard pass for us. And then we'll try and educate them the reasons why it's a hard pass and all the things and all the issues that they're going to encounter. But we see a lot of savvy developers that have built a lot of projects continue to use this method and continue to wonder why their projects are always an issue, right? Why is there always delays? Why is there always schedule issues? Why are we getting so many change orders? And it's because they kind of lost that collaborative mindset of you need to bring in your builder early on, and more of a team mindset, get that pre-construction work done so you can kind of find all that work out. So for us, if they don't share that mindset, then we'll just politely pass on those projects.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So, what should the role of the contractor really be on the project team, and when is that ideal time to bring in that contractor voice?
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of different schools of thought on it, right? Like you can go all the way back to, integrated project delivery, where they should be part of it along with the subcontractor team from day one to really kind of to build the project properly. That's a tough sell for a lot of people, unless people are coming out of the gate with that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So what we like to see at a bare minimum is like, look, if you're at 50% SDs, we like to see the general contractor get involved from a pre-construction standpoint, to start working through creating a relationship with the architect, with the MEP team, with the structural team, and start looking at it, doing constructability reviews early on, so you can actually shift the course of the project early. Because what happens is we see these things get to 75% CDs. Well, at that point, you're too far gone, and you're going to have to redesign the project if you didn't catch a lot of things. So if you bring in the GC early, do constructability review, engage them for a quality pre-con, get those rough order of magnitude pricings done early, so you can continually track your project all the way up to the start date to make sure you're starting it where you want it to start, your schedule's where you want it to be, as opposed to that 3-week process. You get the pricing back in, well, you're $10 million over budget. So what do you do now? It's not that's not really a value engineering process anymore. That's a full redesign, rescoping issue. And now you've lost months and months of time, and you're going back to the drawing board. And we've seen that happen time and time again with owners and developers.
Yeah. What are some of the goals and KPIs that you like to look at to determine success on a project?
It's all those very high level ones that any owner's looking at, right? It's budget, number one, it's schedule, number two, and the quality of the work. So, when we're looking at things, those are the 3 big metrics that we work with. So, that's where we want to spend a lot of time up front understanding what are the targets that we're trying to reach. And I'm always wearing a lot of different hats, right? So depending on what conversation am I talking as a construction manager, owner's rep? Am I talking as a general contractor right now? But for everyone, the general concept is, if I have an initial target budget, where I'm a real estate developer and I've underwritten this project to these metrics, I need this project to be done at $10 million. That's something where, from a construction management standpoint, we're tasked with making sure that happens. And then we want to bring in the general contractor and the teams early on to make sure that we hit those marks. You'd be surprised at the amount of teams that we see put together that have no idea what the budget target is. Architecture teams too. Well, we'll see really amazing projects, and I'll ask the architect, well, what are you designing to? What's the end budget? Oh, we don't know. We just want to design the most beautiful project we can. And then we go back to the client. We're like, well, what's your budget? Oh, it's a really tight budget. We need to make sure that we get this thing done at this number. It's like, well, your architect's over here designing the most beautiful project they can, which means probably a very expensive project. And they just don't have those conversations because they think, well, the architect's designing it and they generally have the concept of what I want, but they don't spend the time to say, hey, budget is important. This is my target. I really need you to design to that and actually put that into their contract agreement. And if you don't, and if you design a project at $20 million, when I asked you to design a $10 million project, I'm not going to pay you again to redesign that project. There's a lot of contractual things as well that you can put in place to protect yourself, but budget is a key metric. And then schedule always, right? Schedule is one of those things that people forget about. They just see it as a factor of, once it's designed, put a schedule together and see where we land. But that's something that we see really kills a lot of developers with delays, but it also really affects general contractor. One of the worst things that can happen to a general contractor is a project gets delayed 6 months, 7 months, because a lot of people will think, oh, well, they're getting paid for it. They're getting extra GCs or whatever it is. That's normally not the case. It's usually a battle to get every other month approved. So up front, really digging into schedule with the entire team. Again, your GC should be part of this conversation. How do we put together a quality schedule that we're going to be able to hit? Is going to help everybody in the long term. So we'll spend a lot of time with that. getting into what is the critical path, what are our long lead time items, and if we can do that and continually month over month, make sure we're tracking on that schedule, it helps a lot because people don't understand the negative effects of, carry and things like that on a developer where, hey, if you go over by 6 months, 7 months, and you factor in the amount of carry and costs that occur on that on all levels, that little bit of pre-construction that you would have spent on the early days would have solved all that.
Right.
And now you're paying 10 times that because you didn't want to spend the upfront time to develop that program properly.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things on the budget schedule and quality of work is getting everybody to the table talking at the beginning of the project, like what you were just saying on the pre-con side of things. How do you go about changing the mindset of the industry to make that a big priority and to put way more attention and effort and resources behind that pre-con section of it than what we're currently doing?
Yeah, that is that's a great question. We talk about that a lot. How can you educate clients and developers? We've wanted to do white papers on projects that we've seen where we've passed on them and we've educated the client on what was going to happen, and it happened even more so than we anticipated. Gone 2 years over schedule, and doubled the budget, and things like that. So I think it's just client by client. Hopefully, you're having the ability to sit with that client and educate them. This is why we got into construction management and owner's representation, because on the GC side, usually rarely get that opportunity to sit down with the client and educate the client on how to set up a project. And usually the project's already mostly designed and you're coming in at that tail end standpoint of, hey, here's a set of plans, kind of start pricing it for us. So that's what really drove us to getting involved on the owner's representation side, was we saw so many problems that were so easy to solve early on. And on that level, it is a lot easier to sitting with the client and educating them up front. Now, a lot of clients don't want to hear it, and a lot of clients don't want to do it. We work with a big cost management group, and they work with a big national firm. This happened last week. They sent us an unbelievable space in West Hollywood, probably a $8-9 million bill. Worked on it for 14 months, 2 weeks. They wanted pricing on this detailed project in 2 weeks, and I talked to the cost manager in wearing my general contractor hat, saying, how are you allowing your client to go through this process? We know where this is going to end up. We're not bidding it because there's no way we can be successful in bidding a project of that size and scope in 2 weeks. But I was more just passionate about talking to this cost manager about, why don't you go back to this client and educate them on what is going to happen? Because it's not if, it is definitely going to happen. Right. They're going to have issues, miss things, there are going to be delays. And that cost manager said, well, I don't want to lose the client. So this is just what it is. It's what they're requiring us to do, so we're going to do it. So again, it's easy to say, sometimes you need revenue and sometimes you need to keep the wheels turning. But if you're in the fortunate position where you can pass on clients, usually what we've seen is they'll come back to you. They'll usually have an issue where they go through a couple horrible projects and they'll say, hey, they'll remember that you were telling them that, and you were, again, very polite, very cordial, very professional about it, passing it in the right way. And if you do that, they'll usually remember that and come back and say, hey, you know what? I remember all those things you said, did encounter all these things. We want to try a project with you. And then when we do see them come back with us, if they do 1 or 2 quality projects and they see what it can be like, then they're just, they'll never work with another firm again. So we're always, and again, it's industry wide where I'm very big on being collaborative on all levels in the same industry, right? So I want to go meet GC CEOs and have breakfast with them, even though we're competitors and we'll compete on the same projects. It's like, I don't care. That's we're always going to have competition, but if you can have that knowledge share and stuff like that, it's so great, and that mentorship or that menteeship or something like that, continually trying to educate each other and help each other in the industry is a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Do you see the momentum picking up on that front in the industry, or is it still kind of in the one-off phase?
No, I do see it. I do see it picking up. And again, it could be specific to us because we spend so much time on trying to find those clients that share that mentality. So it could just be a scenario where we've created that kind of community around us of people that are understanding that a little bit more. And we're very quick to pass on jobs that don't share that mentality. So it could be something that we've created on our own, but we are seeing more people that are open to this concept. And again, we're getting better at explaining it, and people are seeing the value earlier.
Yeah, nice. What's something that you think the construction industry, maybe besides this, is getting wrong currently in their mindset of how they're doing projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably, for me, it's exactly what we're talking about right now. For me, in the construction industry, the biggest failure that I see, and again, I'm really looking at this from development side, management side, and build side. The biggest failure I see is how the industry is treating general contractors. They're treating them as this third-party vendor to be brought in at the last minute without quality input. And that's creating a lot of the failures that we're seeing on a lot of the projects right now. We're working in a very, very difficult time in a very difficult industry. Everything that happened from the pandemic with supply chain issues and things like that. I mean, out in LA, we're 12 to 16 months to get here, things like that.
It's been a crazy 2 years.
People don't understand that you need to know that early on. And a lot of times you're not going to find that until you're talking to your GC. And God forbid you don't engage them till the very end. And then they start educating you about, well, that's 9 months out. That's 6 months out. None of these schedules work. None of these targets work. You might be able to hit it, but you're going to have to redesign all these aspects of your project now to get materials that are available. Those are the quality things that can be brought to the table early on when you engage a GC early on, plus subcontractor input, right? So if you're engaged in pre-construction as a general contractor, they're bringing in their sub base and getting good sub input as well. So we've seen scenarios where we've seen entire projects redesigned from a mechanical standpoint, because we'll bring in our mechanical sub and he'll look at the overarching design and say, this is, a horrible design. It's a good design in terms of, it's going to do what it needs to do. But in terms of efficiency and how much it's going to cost you to do it, if we redesigned it in this manner, it's going to cost 30% less than the exact same thing. So those are the type of things that you can get out of a good pre-construction process, and looking at it from a partnership standpoint as opposed to a third party thing. And the biggest argument we see on this side of the fence is, well, how do I know they're being competitive, right? If I don't go out and just give it to 4 or 5 GCs and ask for competitive bids, how do I know that GC is giving competitive pricing? There's so many checks and balances that you can put in place now from a owner standpoint to ensure the selected general contractors, doing their due diligence and getting you the best pricing. First and foremost, we hope you trust the contractor you're working with out of the gate. You're already in a losing proposition if you don't trust the GC that you're working with. But there's a lot of different things you can do from a contractual standpoint. There's, you get multiple bids per trade, you do bid analysis forms, there's transparency. So there's all those things you can put in place to make sure that you are getting competitive numbers. You're not just going to a GC and letting them give you a piece of paper with a number on it saying this is what it's going to cost you.
Right.
So we kind of go back and say there's multiple areas where we can put in a lot of checks and balances so you can bring them on early and feel comfortable that you're going to get the best numbers. And that's always worked for us and worked well to make sure that, and it's always worked well on the end of the project as well.
Nice. So one of the kind of backbone themes of this show is around innovation in construction. How do you think you take the kind of the heady theoretical concept of innovation and make it practical in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, that we've been tracking a lot of the, and everyone's always looked at the construction industry being very far behind in innovation and things like that. So we're seeing a lot more stuff happen that's exciting in our industry. And, I think it has a long way to go, but just from like a software standpoint, things like that, we're very software heavy to create efficiencies within our firm. So we've worked with Procore for a long time. We've used Bridget Bench, we use Sage for our accounting. So there's a lot of different aspects you can bring to the table, a software standpoint, to make you more efficient overall and to, again, create that collaboration between teams. Because I think the lines of communication in our industry are key. And if you don't have the right kind of technology supporting that, it becomes very difficult, right? If you're just using email to try and communicate with 15 different project teams, that's going to get very spiderwebbed out and very hard to control overall. So we've kind of gone heavy on that early on. In the early days, we beta tested multiple different software programs and things like that. We ended up with Procore at the end of the day. Great program overall. All of our projects are on it. All of our communication goes through it. All of our documents are held there. So it gives us this kind of a little bit of an edge in the industry when we're talking about other teams that don't have any software. And again, very surprised when you get a sneak behind the curtain of some of the larger firms out there, understanding that they actually don't have a lot of software. They're still using old school Excel docs and things like that work well. Obviously, they've done well over the year, but they just, because it's worked and because they had no need to innovate, they just kept doing that. But it's surprising to see firms of certain sizes using those old school mentalities and old school softwares and things like that. And then on the physical side, that's more on the subcontractor side. I always love seeing the stuff that's happening in robotics and the exoskeleton suits for laborers and things that are happening. So the auto layout machines that are happening now. There's a lot of really cool stuff that's happening in the industry. That's more on the trade side, so we don't touch that as much. But on the GC and management side, we're more software focused.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if I could give you all power and you could kind of snap your fingers, innovate one thing in the construction industry, what would you pick to innovate?
Oh man, that's a great question. One single thing to innovate within the construction industry. I mean, honestly, it goes back to that integrated project delivery idea. And how can you create a portal or a system that really pushes that forward and allows teams to come together in a much simpler way? Because again, I think integrated project delivery hasn't taken off because no one's created a software or system that makes it easy for people to collaborate in that manner. It's a great idea. And there's a lot of teams out there that are very well versed in it and can do it well. But it'd be nice if there was a very clean system that allowed people to really come in and understand it in a lot better way. Because I think that's one thing that will really help the industry overall, is if you see more of that integrated project delivery where the health and success of every project is dependent on every person involved, and you need all those people involved early on. So how do you do that? How do you innovate? How do you bring all those people together from a software tech standpoint that makes it easy for everybody, from the manager that's managing that whole system to the people that are coming in underneath it? They understand it, they get it, and they can start using it project over project.
Mm-hmm. The key to any good implementation is simplicity.
Yeah, exactly.
The easier, more simple it is, the more people are going to use it. So.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, how do people find out more information and connect with you?
LinkedIn, obviously. Our core business is ReaumeRichardson.com. Our management business is thecooperativela.com. And then our real estate development is statelyla.com. So again, we have all three firms. We touch all kind of aspects of the commercial real estate world. So if you want to reach out to us on any level, we're happy to hear from you. And we love meeting new people and doing new projects.
Awesome. Well, Bryson, final question for you. What does innovation mean to you?
What does innovation mean to me? I think it's taking something old and finding a better way to do it at the end of the day. So and that rings very true in our industry is, there's and how we see people interacting with GCs. For me, innovation is taking an old mentality and finding a newer, better way to do it.
Love it. More than agree. Thanks so much for taking the time and the conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Todd. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we talk more soon.